Do's and don'ts from a symptomatic SARS CoV2 coronavirus survivor. Valuable knowledge that may save your life. I'd like to thank you for joining me in this video. I would like to apologize ahead of time for this poor quality and length of the video. I'm not a polished public speaker, and I want to disclose that I am not a medical professional. Don't take this as medical advice. I am sharing my personal experiences, hard lessons, and wins with this virus. I'm not selling anything. I don't have stock or shorting any stocks of anything in this video. If you're suffering at this moment, throw away your cup of coffee, go to your fridge, make yourself a cheese plate or 2 margarine and cheese sandwiches. Extra cheese. Try these 2 things first. Then I can gain your trust in what I say is true. You'll most likely start feeling better by the time you end this video, as long as you don't have caffeine in your system. If you want to skip this long video and go directly to the do's and don'ts list and conclusions, go to the last 13 minutes of the second part of this video. Don't worry, there will only be these 2 videos on my channel. In fact, I recommend most people to do this. When you see something that piques your interest, unfortunately, you will have to come back to this point and start the video from here to find the logic, experiments, science behind my assertions and observations. I promise you, you will notice results. Please time it to see how fast these effects happen. My objective of this video is for people who are nervous about this virus to quell this anxiety, and for those who are already infected and symptomatic to relieve your symptoms as fast as possible and to have minimum suffering going forward. I would be shocked if you did not see results after 2 meals of cheese bowls with a teaspoon of margarine or 2 cheese sandwiches with margarine. That's symptom relief or noticeable reduction in 8 hours or less. Well, let's begin with the whole list of my symptoms. First was extremely dry back of the throat, cough, shortness of breath, traveling leg pain, probably related to a blood clot. I had chest tightness and pain, left lung pain, deep pain near my left shoulder blade, assuming lung pain, low-grade fever, short-term loss of smell sensitivity, brief time with chills, and probably a few other symptoms that I don't recall. But the strongest, most worrisome symptom was the shortness of breath. By chance, during this time, I did pass a small kidney stone, but I get them often and I don't treat them if I don't treat them properly. These symptoms would come and go for the 3 weeks I was experimenting. My most persistent symptom that started on day 3 or 4 was a mild left lung pain. This symptom was my alarm clock that would let me know when I had to adjust my dose or if I forgot to dose for a duration of about 3 weeks. Moving to my comorbidities. If I was a virus and I wanted to hit the jackpot, I would want to infect yours truly. Starting off, I'm a Caucasian, overweight, 250 pounds for 5'9", history of mild asthma, hypertension, sugar, cholesterol, weak immune system as a bonus. The virus would have felt right at home in a person like me. As you could probably guess, I am not a health freak or advocate of that kind of thing. I am, however, very in tune with my body. I know very early if something is off, if something is different. Okay, let's move on how and why I beat this thing with numerous symptoms, but my actual duration of suffering, not counting when I was experimenting, purposely tried to cause symptoms. My total suffering time was spread over 4 days, approximately 13, 18 hours. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Less than 20 hours of suffering throughout this whole ordeal. Why did I suffer so few hours? And let me tell you, a few hours was intense. So much so, I almost checked myself into the hospital for supplemental oxygen. That particular evening, I learned the most important thing, what not to do. I learned this either accidentally or my wife tried to kill me. Kidding, honey. If it wasn't for this incident, would not have found this important aspect to controlling the virus. You will hear about this story later. So how a fat, hypertensive, asthmatic guy with a weak immune system know, for the most part, how to beat this virus down? Weak immune system was the key to my decades of lessons, experience, and experiments of trying to figure out how to cheat the system. About 13 years ago, I learned what works. I learned from colds, flu, cold sores, chikungunya, and dengue. Before I learned these valuable lessons, I used to get colds and flus about 4 times a year. A ton of research pointed the way. I coincidentally got a cold sore tingle in my lip and a cough simultaneously. The one supplement I learned to use for the cold sore made the cough go away. The one supplement took care of both of them before they advanced any further. It was like they hit a brick wall. Ever hear of the saying, kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Well, this was it. Bingo. This was my epiphany, changing the way I think. Amino acid arginine. While it is healthy amino acid, most of the time it can be damn deadly when you are under most viral conditions. The analogy I am going to make is this. A human body argumentatively needs 3 things to sustain life: air, food, and water. Take one of these 3 things away from the body and eventually will die. Just a matter of time. Same principle here. Most viruses require arginine to reproduce. Starve the virus of arginine, you take away a key ingredient, a key necessity for viral replication. Allowing time for the immune system to mount a proper defense. The question is how to put a stranglehold on this virus by limiting the amount of arginine availability or accessibility to feed the viral replication process. I believe there are 3 ways, but we will talk about 2 ways to reduce arginine intake and or displace the arginine with its adversarial sibling lysine. These 2, arginine and lysine, fight each other for access to metabolic pathways. Put too much L-lysine in the body, the other is prevented, reduced, or displaced from feeding the virus. Simple as that. I was fairly certain that the coronavirus family was an arginine-dependent virus. Relying on the past 13 years of my experience, if I had cough that lasted more than a day, it turned out not to be virus-related, but bacterial or mold, for example. Antibiotics to the rescue. Usually, 2 pills of 1,000 milligrams taken 8 hours apart were enough to knock out any virus with virtual no suffering, a horrible symptomatic cold or flu. This is something that I did in the past. Approximately a month before I got infected, brief research using proper keywords, lysine, coronavirus, led me to this gem. Vitamin D, L-lysine, glycine, and in 2016 study inhibiting viral replication of coronavirus in a lab. This confirmed my suspicion that coronavirus family, which is this study happens to be about MERS, was arginine dependent for replication. MERS coronavirus mortality rate was approximately 30%, way higher than this mortality rate. Thankfully, MERS is way less transmissible. While this study had 3 ingredients, I promise you that lysine was doing the lion's share of the work. This study at least confirmed that coronavirus family was arginine dependent and made me relieved, and I ordered 3 big bottles of L-lysine since I was down to 1 bottle and a few other supplements I will talk about later. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, I was the 2nd or 3rd person I knew who got infected. So I had one preliminary positive outcome with a coworker prior to my infection. A coworker who only had anosmia, the lack of smell and taste. He took lysine for 2 days and the symptoms went away. I was actually confused and mildly disappointed why it took so long. I found out later why it took so long. He was super happy after 2 to 3 weeks without taste or smell to have it return, like an epiphany, he said. Shortly after this small success, I caught the virus. Now, usually in the past, I never take lysine as a preventative or prophylaxis, but this time was different. The big bad coronavirus was coming for my asthmatic lungs, and everyone was afraid of it. Thankfully to Chris Martinson and the crew of Peak Prosperity, thankfully to Dr. John Campbell, these two guys had the top YouTube coverage in the earliest days of the virus since January. My hat's off to you fellas. You gave me a chance to get ready and order my supplements and prepare for the upcoming pandemic. I will be eternally grateful. Okay, moving on to supplements and my prophylactic regimen that I was taking and obviously failed because I did get infected. I ordered liposomal vitamin C, the good stuff, 1,600 milligrams. Vitamin D, 250 micrograms, that's 10,000 IU, 1,000 milligrams of L-lysine and zinc lozenges. If I was to do it over, I would have ordered quercitin and elderberry to experiment with. I was not aware of these products before I was infected. Approximately 3 weeks before I became symptomatic, I was taking 1,000 milligrams of L-lysine, 3,200 milligrams of liposomal vitamin C, and vitamin D3. I did take zinc lozenges on occasion. I also went to the pharmacy locally and got azithromycin and a few other goodies. Thank God for living in a free country, as I didn't need any prescriptions to get it. As for my daily dosing and body reaction, I have IBS routinely, so I cannot speak on the body reaction of my cocktail to vitamin C. I do get kidney stones throughout the year, and if I don't treat the body with yellow lemons twice a week, and I had a small stone migrate down to the bladder, a non-event really, a coincidence I suspect. I am Caucasian, live in the tropics, work some hours per week outside. Vitamin D is free as long as you go outside and get it daily. I understand that 15 minutes in a short sleeve shirt is enough for light-skinned people to get a sufficient dose. If I did not work outside for 2 days, I would start taking the vitamin D3 supplement in the morning. Numerous studies and statistics are aligning to point to show one serious topic. Those who have sufficient vitamin D in their blood at the time of death makes a small percentage of total deaths. We are talking less than 10%. Today, an Indonesian study of their dead showed that 4% of their dead had proper vitamin D levels, while 99% of their deaths had very low vitamin D levels. I don't know how they come up with those statistics, but statistics are showing in the states while African Americans are only 12% of the population, in many states they are making up 30, 40, or even 50% of total deaths in some areas. For those of you who do not know, the darker the pigmentation of the skin, the least efficient of making vitamin D. Get your blood percentage checked and supplement to correct, please. While there may be other social economic factors, vitamin D for people of color or the people who are cave dwellers and never leave the house, it would be a great idea. Dr. John Campbell once stated in his research, Italy had an extreme vitamin D deficiency in their population. Strange as that may seem. The pre-symptomatic battle plan was daily 1,000 milligrams L-lysine, 3,200 milligrams vitamin C, and 2 days of no sun, vitamin D. This failed. And to be fair, I am certain I was hit with a high inoculum, a high quantity of the virus at one shot. It probably caught all the available strains and strands of the virus. I'm nearly positive I was infected by the exhaust of the lavatory storage tank of a 737. Yes, this virus can be transmitted by aerosolized fecal matter. I wouldn't worry about farts too much if I were you, but at least you know. I either got infected that way or my wife, who also works at the airport. I had not left the house in weeks other than to go to work, and I kept all precautions I could, sanitizing my office, distancing, and I would like to blame it on my wife if I could, and hopefully she doesn't feel a little down about it, but she never became symptomatic. So I would label her as an asymptomatic infected. Once I get an antibody test done, she will get hers done so we can donate plasma. Let's walk through the phases of the virus for me. Day 1 started with a slight tickle in the back of the throat. About an hour later, small easy cough. Took an extra 1,000 milligrams of L-lysine around 2 p.m. Before 3 p.m., symptoms are gone. What a relief to know that lysine was going to make a big factor in this fight. 2,000 milligrams lysine that first day in total on top of my normal other regimen. Day 2 was nearly a mirror image of day 1. By 1 p.m., dry throat, cough, 2 p.m. lysine, symptoms are gone. Day 3, normal 7 a.m. regimen. I decided to be proactive and take a second lysine and a second extra vitamin C around 12:30. No symptoms that day. Day 4, I repeated the entire dose the day before. Started taking my temperature that day, and around 5 p.m. I was 37.6 degrees Celsius. This 37.6 C was the threshold that the Chinese would use to test people suspected of coronavirus. Once they got to that threshold, they were tested, period. Around 8 to 9 p.m., roughly a slight shortness of breath, the ever so slightest mild left lung pain. Very tolerable, but disconcerting. Went to bed, woke up fine. Day 5, normal as previous 2 days doses. 1,000 milligrams L-lysine, 3,200 milligrams of vitamin C, vitamin D, and around 1 p.m., 1,000 milligrams lysine, 3 p.m., 3,200 milligrams vitamin C. 5 p.m., temperature check was 37.5. Feeling nothing wrong. Around 8 to 8:30 p.m., the same symptoms as the day before, but about 3 times as strong. 9 p.m., took a Zyrtec to eliminate the possibility that it was an allergy. I took my normal asthma medicine. Last time I used it was many months earlier. Around 10 p.m., I took AZITHROMYCIN, extra lysine, very hot shower, breathing in the vapor, used an electric heating pad on my chest. By 10:30, I was in bed. Fell asleep shortly thereafter. Had no trouble sleeping. I regret not taking my temperature for these 2 nights when the symptoms hit. The day 6, the day that almost sent me to the hospital. I woke up feeling like a champ. Absolutely triumphant. I beat the beast back. Normal morning daily regimen, afternoon regimen, 1 p.m. lysine, 3 p.m. vitamin C, and I planned on a 10 p.m. 1,000 milligram lysine. 5 p.m. temp check, 37.6, slightly elevated, but not really a fever. Around 7 p.m., my sweet wife was bored, wanted to do something different. I was feeling no symptoms, happy as a clam. I beat back the virus yesterday, feeling cocky, She offered me a cup of coffee. I said, sure. Probably been a month or so since I had a great cup, and I said, bring it on. Now, the coffee here is no PG-13 cup of coffee you get in the States or England. This is XXX coffee, about the equivalent of 2 espressos. Hardcore coffee that can probably wake the dead. 45 minutes to 1 hour and a half later, I don't know exact time, was the beginning of the end. Symptoms rolled in with such ferocity, speed, many new locations of the pain. I am starting to panic. Shortness of breath. Pain. So many places. My panic did not let me remember all the locations I had pain. I am now scared beepless. Extra lysine, normal daily dose of azithromycin. I'm now understanding this is a full-blown cytokine storm. A 2-hour difference from happy as a clam turned into holy smokes and call the funeral parlor for a reservation. 2 hours after symptoms, absolute chaos is going on in my body. I'm speaking to my wife about driving me to the hospital for supplemental oxygen. I have this chest pain, anxiety, and energy that could not be mistaken for adrenaline. I had the thought that I did not want to go to the hospital, and they would not let me take my pills with me. I wanted to be in control of my medicine and not some brainwashed doctor following a flawed protocol set by the FDA. At this time in this country, anyone that was infected had to stay in the hospital, no home isolation. The hospitals were not full yet. This makes me more nervous. Before I go upstairs, I take another 500 to 1,000 milligrams of L-lysine. I can't remember really. In total, I'm taking 3,500 to 4,000 milligrams for the day. of lysine. I run to the hot shower, spend 15 to 20 minutes attempting to breathe in the vapors, artificially give my body a fever. I put on a fleece and I put a heating pad on my lungs and under the fleece, and I try to sleep under a thick blanket, in the tropics, mind you. While in March, it's not very hot, and no, I cannot unequivocally tell you what helped that evening or not. I used so many methods, there was no way to experiment in those dire circumstances. After I got to bed, I cannot tell you if it was a half hour or 2 hours before I got to sleep, but when I did sleep, it was great. I just remembered that I think I took melatonin as well. Day 7, woke up feeling absolutely fine, like nothing happened the night before. I am dumbfounded. I go and take my normal 7 a.m. regimen. Around 10 a.m. or so, my wife comes down and offers me a cup of coffee. I was about to say yes, and it occurred to me, wait, before I got violently sick last night, about to go to the hospital, feeling it was not too long after a cup of coffee. I decided to research 2 words: coffee arginine. This brought me to the second most important revelation, a study that shows caffeine inhibits, slows, or stops the body from normally digesting arginine. Caffeine forces the arginine into metabolic pathways. Understand this. This is critical. If the body is not consuming its normal hourly usage of arginine, even temporarily, due to its caffeine partnership, then this spikes the available arginine quantity and forces it into those metabolic pathways that it was competing with lysine. My theory is forcing the excess arginine right into the loving arms of the virus. Of course, there is no official study that this is true, because then they would have to admit that arginine feeds the virus and the lysine can stop it. It is my theory that arginine-caffeine partnership force feeds the same virus that lysine was choking out by preventing reproduction. The same metabolic pathways that arginine in partnership with caffeine is now dominating and feeding the cytokine storm. If not feeding the cytokine storm, it is displacing the lysine from calming down the storm. Lysine actually has the added benefit of inhibiting IL-6 receptors and cooling down a cytokine storm. It was winning the war against arginine coronavirus until I drank a cup of coffee. I call it the cup that almost killed me. If this does not blow your mind that a large percentage of the population is unwittingly sabotaging their own recovery, then you are really hard to impress. Top it off, I find out weeks later that coffee is high in arginine. So like adding fuel on top of the fire on top of a nitrous oxide powered racer. I want to reiterate this in the era of the coronavirus, a plague that has destroyed all economies of the world. This is probably the most important 2 minutes of this video. Arginine works with coffee to feed virus replication, displaces lysine from keeping the cytokines calm, and making things exponentially worse. And to top it all off, coffee has arginine for extra fuel for the whole fire to beat you while you are down. This is the most important point of this entire video. Avoid coffee. You will have adverse effects from this. Try not to take lysine and coffee in the same hours, as the combination will make you feel like a triple espresso, especially if you're overweight. While I have no official studies on this matter, I promise you, I am right. Coffee will extend the time you are infected, symptomatic. It will multiply your symptoms. If you do not stop coffee with time, you will reach the point of no return in damage to your organs, and you will not recover. This brings me back to my coworker who was infected with a lack of smell and taste symptoms. After I realized this and confirmed the coffee information, I asked him if he drank coffee often. He tells me 3 times a day, even when he was symptomatic. I theorize, I'm fairly certain, I am certain, that if he was a non-coffee drinker, quite plausible that he may never have had a symptom at all. Actually, after 24 hours of him not improving, I instinctually asked what was his daily routine, and he told me he drank coffee. I asked him to stop drinking coffee, as you know, it was an unknown variable, and probably that was what helped speed him to recovering his sense of smell and taste. This theory led me to run 2 experiments after the cup that almost killed me night. And no, I am not stupid. I waited until I weaned down to 0 lysine, 0 symptoms before doing that experiment to minimize danger. In my inquisitive experimental nature, 30 hours after the last dose of lysine and no symptoms, about the 3rd week, sometime in the 3rd week, I wanted to confirm my suspicion. I drank a cup of strong coffee. This was a 2-fold experiment to confirm the virus was still with me and asymptomatic, and that coffee can reinvigorate the virus. Well, folks, the previous week and a half was pretty easy as far as symptoms are concerned, and that was a very light dosing of lysine. I was managing them beautifully without any suffering, conducted over a dozen experiments, and when symptoms started to show their ugly head, lysine to the rescue. I call this the post-30-hour 0 lysine, 0 symptoms cup game of chicken. 45 minutes after a cup of coffee, symptoms showed. 1 hour after a cup, speed of symptoms returned and ferocity was surprising. 1 hour and 15 minutes, I was already contemplating taking lysine. Was getting nervous. I decided to play a game of chicken with the virus and see who would flinch first. About 1.5 hours after the cup, symptoms so strong, taking my breath away, I flinched. I chickened out. And I took 1,000 milligrams of lysine, 2 cups of water. The symptoms seemed to plateau about 10 to 15 minutes later. All the same symptoms from the accidental cup that almost killed me night, but less severe. A few new pains in the lung in the back, shoulder blade, but at this moment I was seriously regretting this experiment. Approximately 45 minutes later, the symptoms were not improving. Took another 1,000 milligrams of lysine, and within an hour, within a half hour, noticeable reduction of symptoms, a relaxation of sorts. Within an hour of the second pill, back to normal, but with the added energy kick that lysine gives me. This proved the previous studies that I linked together were unequivocally correct. Shortly after this experiment, in my research, I found that coffee was high in arginine, on top of the previous mentioned dangerous caffeine-arginine link. Coffee is dangerous for infected people. In fact, since most viruses are arginine dependent, then coffee may be dangerous for all people with a viral condition. Don't sabotage your own recovery. Stop shooting yourself in the foot. Quit coffee even before you get infected, so you do not have to deal with the withdrawals of caffeine and coronavirus symptoms simultaneously. Of the 27 people who reported to me, the 3 with the most difficulties were the ones who drank 2 cups a day until they quit. For the next 2 days, they were suffering withdrawals from the caffeine and symptoms of the coronavirus, but shortly thereafter, they were controlling it completely with lysine and, suffering the withdrawal headaches. I did drink Coke during this infection, and I found that Coke is 1/3 of the caffeine that a cup of coffee is. And I never noticed any adverse effects. For those of you experiencing severe caffeine withdrawals, find your favorite soda to ease your suffering. Just try to limit it. Do not drink high caffeine teas, energy drinks, or sodas, as your life may depend on it. Getting back to the other 2 weeks of infection, happily to say, they were mostly uneventful, with my biggest side effect for day 8 and 9 was the energy that lysine gave me. Small area, tight chest, loaded with energy, jittery, anxious. I was on azithromycin for these 2 days. Once I got my dosage of L-lysine correct and had 100% correlation that lysine controlled the symptoms, I stopped using vitamin C completely and vitamin D shortly after. although I did eat a good amount of fruits rich in C. After the 4 days of azithromycin, once I was completely asymptomatic between doses, I controlled the jittery anxious with a rum and coke or a small beer. That took the edge off the energy and worked for me well. Do not drink alcohol while taking antibiotics, but lysine, for those of you who are dying for a drink, does not care if you're drinking or not. Please make sure you are completely asymptomatic before having any alcohol. It will inhibit your healing if you have damage. I had plenty of rum drinks post-antibiotics, being a touch cocky in celebration, and the following 2 weeks were full of wonderful experiments, proving time and time again, using different Argentine foods to provoke symptoms. I used lysine-rich foods to prolong duration before symptoms returning, signaling a need to dose with lysine. I was experimenting to see how little lysine I can get away with without becoming symptomatic, part of my weaning process. Most common first mild symptom to remind me to take lysine was a 2 square inch left lung pain. It was like clockwork. Curious what symptom will be your alarm clock to take some lysine. Actually, let's make a game of it. In the comments, please let me know when you are completely asymptomatic and you miss or forget your dose, what symptom and where did you get it? If you are here at this moment in this video and you got lysine on time and quick coffee, yes, I'm confident you can play this game. Remember, the moment you get a symptom, take a 500 milligram or 1,000 milligram, whatever you're doing, take it with 2 cups of water and wait until the symptoms go away before eating. I promise it will be shortly non-existent unless you did something counterproductive like eating peanut butter or drink coffee shortly before this. In all of my numerous experiments, I had one goal. Unexpectedly, a second goal emerged. The original goal was to prove time and time again that this virus was arginine dependent. And lysine was an effective way to castrate this virus, and it is without a doubt. Second surprise goal was to prove coffee was the worst thing out there, and it is unequivocal. What I want people to understand is to keep the virus experience asymptomatic as much as possible and breeze through this event and get your antibody badge of honor. Once you have your antibody, you should not be able to be reinfected for some time. The exact time, nobody knows yet. Hey, relax. You have the knowledge how to beat this back with proper vitamin D levels, lysine supplements, or lysine-rich foods, and avoid coffee as if your life depended on it. You have the ammo, now you not need to fear the war. At the time of this writing, the scientific and medical community is starting to change their belief that SARS CoV2 is actually a pulmonary disease. It may be a blood clotting virus. This makes sense as there are a few unexplained 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds getting strokes. They are saying there is a possibility that this is a clotting disease as opposed to a pulmonary disease. And that makes sense. The lungs are full of small passages that are perfect target for blood clots, causing many sections of the lung to inflame. This illusion has tricked the pulmonary doctors into believing it is a pulmonary specific disease and not treating it as a clotting problem. This is a theory that they are examining, but let's see what happens. I just begun research in this direction and I noticed that there was a warning of using lysine and blood thinners due to difficulties to stop bleeding. Appears that probability that lysine may have a blood thinning effect. Beneficial if this virus turns out to be a clotting disease. Don't get cut. While this is an assumption, as I could not find any clear studies, and honestly, there are not many studies on lysine and its side effects, I would venture to say you will find more side effects listed in this video than on any official website or mainstream websites for drug side effects and interactions. Another positive side effect is for diabetics. There is a warning that after several weeks of lysine use, sugar levels seem to need to be monitored due to the fact that they return to a more normal range. Test regularly. This is only a few of the numerous potential life-saving tricks that lysine has up its sleeve in relation to coronavirus. Most importantly, lysine is inhibiting arginine for viral replication. Second most important is controlling or calming the cytokine storm. Third, probable blood thinning characteristics to clear clots out of lungs. 4, lower glucose levels, therefore reducing comorbidities. 5, lysine works so fast at subduing a virus, a doctor can be forgiven thinking it's an antipyretic, fever-reducing medicine. For example, one person who had 6 days of fever, 3 hours after first dose, and fever was gone. Since I found out lysine suppresses the virus below the symptomatic threshold, I, of course, spread the news to friends and family. I gave away over 150 pills to good friends, about 10 pills each. Simple instructions. Give 1,000 milligrams to anyone suspected of being infected. 2 cups of water, and preferably 1 hour before a meal. See if symptoms return that day. Only use 2 pills per day if symptoms return. Take a half a pill above that if you're suffering. Nearly all lysine manufacturers label their product with recommendations of 3,000 milligrams per day, taken on an empty stomach. I do not advise you to do that. 1,000 milligrams twice a day and supplement half a pill if you're feeling symptoms return. If symptoms return after that, 500 milligrams, wait an hour, another 500 milligrams, no coffee. The success stories started rolling in. One after another, people praising how quickly it worked, what is the name of it, where to buy it, etc. We spread the word on the internet, friends of friends, and finally found 3 people that it did not work quickly. And by quickly, I am saying taking 2 to 3 days for significant improvement. Once we nailed down the issues, codeine for one, coffee for all, they got extremely better. One woman, 6 weeks with symptoms, asked 2 days after she quit her coffee and feeling good, she asked on day 4 after first lysine exposure if she can go running. Proud moments, I tell you. 10 pills is what most people needed to get better and remain asymptomatic. Although nearly all of the 27 people needed 10 pills in total of 1,000 milligrams of lysine, I, on the other hand, am not so lucky. Unfortunately, I have a weak immune system and a high BMI, so I needed an average of 2,500 to 3,000 milligrams per day, spaced out by 8 hours. I guess on a positive note, if I had a strong immune system, I probably would never have learned about lysine or wouldn't be making this video today. I would most likely be misdiagnosed, mistreated, intubated, or dead. This may fall under that age-old saying, well, God has a plan for you, or everything happens for a reason. Not that I'm very religious, but I thought it was fitting. Here we come to the catch. Everything has a catch. You know there has to be a catch. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, please read the side effects for yourself. Speak to your general practitioner doctor if you have further doubts. People who are at weight or underweight may not experience any of these side effects. Most consistent side effect was the energy it gives slightly overweight to obese people. This can be problematic and much more pronounced when you get near 3,000 milligrams. This gives you a slight tightness of chest, an anxious, energetic feeling, almost like you want to go work out, doing bench press or push-ups. This is my most annoying side effect. At 2,000 milligrams per day, if it was noticeable, it was more like a cup of coffee. At 3,000 milligrams, the sensation was almost like a double espresso. At 3,500 to 4,000 milligrams per day is like a double espresso and an energy drink. Even though I am technically ill with SARS CoV2, I felt like I wanted to run around the block to drain the energy. I could have tried to catch Usain Bolt. One good side effect is that it helps your body absorb calcium. You may want to skip on the calcium supplements for the time being. Speak to your doctor about it. He's probably not aware of that link. Depending on what website you read, one website reports isolated case of renal failure. One website lists another side effect. I need to read more on it. While I never ever read about any coronary issues, I would advise not giving obese elderly people with heart issues more than 250 milligrams every 3 hours, or, adjust it to see how they feel, how they react. Make sure they are relaxed and no issues, and understand that this will give you an overall energy, and at higher doses, a little pectoral tightening, like you want to do push-ups or bench press. Honestly, I would go with the yogurt, cheese sandwiches, papaya approach instead of a direct dose of lysine for those people. Start slow, give it 20 or 40 minutes between servings of food, and see how they react. These food are loaded with lysine, light on arginine. This is the end of part 1 video, and I'm sorry that it's taken so long. Please connect to part 2, and see you shortly.